And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of the Autist Circle at number 23. Or is it episode 3, second season? I can never remember. I'm one of your hosts, Bleach Demon, and as always, the immaculate Total Blackout Painting, also known as Fat Dave.
Hello. So today we got episode 23, season 2, episode 3. We're talking about Jacopo da Pontormo today, who was an Italian manner, and we spent a lot of time talking about Mannerism last season, especially when we talked about Caravaggio and Gentileschi and stuff. Because of the way that the Baroque movement splintered off from the Mannerist movement. So I thought we'd talk about one of the Mannerist artists that really drove that style, pioneers of the style, kind of an interesting artist all around. So just to find out to bridge the gap between the High Renaissance and artists like Titian and Raphael and the Baroque artists. So we'll start off here with the let me get to my right scene here. There we go. Okay, so first off, we'll start with the art history timeline here. So like I said, Mannerism is the bridge between the perfection of the High Renaissance and the unapologetic realism of the Baroque period. The Renaissance had given the world amazing and beautiful pieces of the idealized and perfect human form. It depicted a world determined by archetypes, perfection, and harmony, like we talked about with Raphael. The emergence of Mannerism was a result of an uncertain world. The collapse of the established political order, the incursion of the Ottoman Turks and Islam, the Reformation, and the chaotic led to a chaotic world where the only real insulation was money and wealth. The turbulence in the art world was not just a reflection of cultural not just a reflection of cultural and a reflection of cultural upheaval, but of the wealthy battling for supremacy and status. So this was also during the War of the Papal States. So there was a lot going on during this time period in history. So Pontormo's active career begins before the sack of Rome in 1527 and lasts until the Counter-Reformation era that eventually led to the Baroque movement. Pontormo represents the first conscious artistic rejection of the stability and perfection of the Renaissance style. His elongated figures, existing independent of gravity and physical constraints, exemplified the ambitions of the time where people felt the world was in flux and anything was possible. So, with that, we'll hop over to the biography. So, Jacopo Carucci, also known as Jacopo da Pontormo, because they often named people after the cities where they lived. He was born in 1494 to Bartolome de Jacopo di Martino Carucci and Alessandra di Pasquale di Zanobi in the Italian city of Pontormo, near Empoli in central Italy. And his parents were not wealthy nobility. His father died when he was 5, and his mother, leaving him an orphan at an early age, which he was placed into guardianship. And he was described as a young alcoholic and lonely. And this unstable beginning really sets the stage for his future.
I mean, I just can't understand being melancholic and an orphan at 10. I absolutely can't see that at all.
Right? It's really such a rough start. Because he was, an orphan, but like orphans then were treated totally differently than they are now. I mean, it's never a good time to be an orphan, but an orphan during the especially the War of the Papal States during that period had to be especially taxing. And he was placed. He was kind of a ward of the state.
Mm-hmm.
As a teenager, he was sent to Florence to apprentice as a painter. And as we've discussed previously, you know, painting was a trade. It was not, you know, some froofy erudite bullshit. It was like hard work. So Painter's Workshop was not a soft place. It was a trade, and young Pontormo was set to grinding pigment, preparing pens, and copying works of masters and learning anatomy. And some of the pigments that they had to use now, there's an interesting channel. I think it's called Rebecca something, Art by Rebecca. I don't know, but she deals with a lot of toxic paints. So in order to get the pigments and stuff they needed to get, then it really required them to deal with a lot of toxic. I mean, lead was not an uncommon thing for them to use. And, you know, in light of that, it's really an amazing feat of Titian to have lived till 90. But the workshops were a hard place for kids to learn. And he was shuffled from workshop to workshop, which was unusual and is generally seen because of his temperament, because he was kind of defiant and rebellious, which will play out in his expression later. But he worked on a lot of workshops because he worked with Leonardo da Vinci briefly, Mariotto Albertinelli, Piero de Cosimo, before eventually landing at the workshop of Andrea del Sarto, who would be his final master. Okay. So we got a nice shot of Florence here. Under Sarto, Pontormo learned the fine technicalities of painting, and then he stuck with short time as well. And it didn't seem that Sarto really bore him much goodwill, probably because he was probably a mouthy little shit, and because he was melancholic and defiant. Yeah. So it really tracks that he would have been angry, you know, an angry young man, and being shuffled from place to place and having to deal with, of course, artists weren't always the most stable people either. So that's likely his, likely a good part of it. So the biographer, Giorgio Vasari, described him as introverted, sensitive, socially awkward. And while Vasari was prone to dramatic characterizations, Pontormo's diaries have confirmed a pattern of isolation and obsessive habits, which would have likely made him, you know, annoying to any master. So he briefly traveled to Rome to look at the works of Michelangelo, which really influenced his, like it did with many artists at the time. And while many artists chase prestige in Italy, and we've seen that with a lot of different artists traveling around Italy and Europe to learn from other artists and gain acclaim. He did not. Pontormo stayed in Florence and worked quietly and diligently. In the 1510s, the 1520s, and in his 20s and 30s, the Medicis had returned to power after a period of exile. And he painted in and around Florence, often supported by the Medici patronage, and this helped him stabilize financially and allowed him the freedom to expand his style. In the 1520s, his work began to take on the idiosyncrasies of a Mannerist style. elongated bodies, natural poses, ambiguous emotional feelings, and compressed compositions. And he's taking all he's learned from the various masters and kind of condensing it into his own style. And it really made him pretty popular at the time. So, in 1527, Rome was besieged by the mutinous troops of Charles V during the War of the League of Cognac. So we got a picture of Charles V here, Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. And here is a scene of this is from the Siege of Florence. This is a painting by Vasari in 1558. And you can see there's, all the troops set up outside of the walls. The cities had walls then.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
But this was a really big, it was a big thing at the time because Florence was sieged for a number of years, and that led to massive amounts of starvation and poverty inside of the city. So in 1529 to 1530, Florentine rebels fought against the Medici rule and attempts to restore the Republic. And this lasted until after the Congress of Bologna, and Medici Pope Clement VII. Let me get over to find my mouse here. There we are. 7th. This gentleman here, he was one of the popes that was friendly with the Medicis. And Charles V agreed to restore the city to Medici rule. And Pontormo was in Florence during the time, and the instability would challenge the harmony and divine order that the Renaissance worldview used. And this phase marks the emergence of the Mannerist art, as Mannerism as a movement. And he becomes one of the most influential Mannerist artists. After the siege end, Pontormo is no longer a rising artist, but established talent, and he's the most polished and aristocratic Mannerist painters in Florence. And while other artists at the time thrive on court culture, Pontormo really withdrew from it and became a bit hermetic. He hated visitors.
I can understand that.
He didn't hang out at the courts. Yeah. And he was really he really comes off as very neurotic when you look into him. And the Vasari, of course, didn't have those words, or didn't have those words at the time, but that's kind of a description of him now, as neurotic. As he moves later into the 1530s, he becomes more withdrawn, and he keeps a diary where he obsessively details his diet, digestion, and minor illnesses, every minor ache and discomfort, and even who he avoids seeing. So he has lists of, like, today I told this guy to fuck off. He also kept, like, it was really, and this is why I say it was neurotic, because he would keep a diary of how he digested food, which I'm sure inspecting his poop.
Yes,
which is weird,
I can kind of
weird dude.
Imagine it now. It's like, so I had this potato soup. Well, not potato soup, but this soup, and it gave me a loose stool. So I will only be eating it on Tuesdays of every month.
Yeah, it does seem very much like that. And then also, like, oh, I woke up today and my hip hurt, or my arm hurt when I slept funny, something like that, which I'm sure became more and more as he got older, like it does with us. Like you were saying, you're picking up a fucking case the other day. I hurt my back the other day.
I am not writing that down in the diary where it's like, yes, I crippled myself for 2 days by picking up a suitcase. I guess I'm not going to be a famous artist.
Yeah.
Damn.
Right. So one of the claims Vasari said in his biography was that he had a staircase built into his rooms that he could fucking retract to just keep people from bothering him, keep visitors. So he's like basically rolling up the stairs so that nobody can even come knock on his door at night, which I think is hilarious.
Okay,
And
so far
I
this
was
guy's
listening
one of my
and
favorite
writing down.
artists.
Yeah, he seems incredibly relatable. I was listening to a presentation from an Italian art historian talking about Pontormo and how he built a house, a really big house, really kind of far away from the city, like still in the city, but far away from everyone else. And it was a big stately manor, and he basically never left it. He was there all the time. I mean, he left it to work, of course, but because he painted frescoes and chapels and stuff like that, he has kind of a hideaway away from the court and away from everybody. So in his final work, which was the San frescoes done at the Church of San Lorenzo, which have since been destroyed. His work culminates in figures in strange poses and complex positions and ambiguous theological layering. So this is a sketch from that. He has lots of surviving sketches. Although those did not survive, the sketches do. And they do show the weird portion and kind of piles of bodies that we'll see in some of his other works. So in 1557, he dies in Florence, and while his life ended, his style and the impact of his work carries on through artists like Bronzino, and his style until the style gave way to the Baroque and other Southern art movements. So this is painting from Bronzino. This is Cupid and Venus, and we'll be looking at Pontormo's version of this painting, which is different, but still, you the Mannerism, or the contortion of the bodies in unnatural positions, and how the whole scene is collapsed. It's very compressed, and it seems to exist not on a three-dimensional plane, but just pushed together, which is characteristic of the Mannerism. Okay. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into our first piece, and this is Saint Anne and the Four Saints. So this was painted between 1528 and 29. It's oil on panel, and it measures 228 by 176 centimeters, or 90 by 70 inches. So it's pretty good sized, and it's currently in the Louvre. And this was originally painted monastery of Santa in Verazia, outside of Florence's Porta San Ferdinando, and hence the presence of Saint Anne. Characters from left to right are Saint Sebastian in green with the arrow in his neck and the halo. Peter, who's in the saffron, and he's holding the keys, like Peter often does.
Yep.
And then the penitent thief, who is the one carrying, and then Benedict of Nursia in the monk's habit. So in 1370, the church was the halfway point of a procession on St. Anne's feast, which occurs on July 26th, to commemorate the city's liberation from the Duke of. And that's really represented by the medallion at her feet, or at the front, at the feet of Mary's throne. It shows, or Madonna's throne. It shows the infantry captain and some company captains. It shows trumpeters and pipers and a bunch of other figures. And this painting was commissioned by an infantry captain for the church. It shows the elongated necks and odd proportions and perspective, emblematic of the Mannerist movement, along with the pastel and contrasting colors, popular with the movement as well. So we'll look at the let's look at the figures a bit here. You can see Madonna's neck is craned in a very weird and unnatural way.
Yes.
As with the Christ child. Go ahead.
I'm just it's almost unnatural looking, that uncanny valley effect with a lot of the necks, the arms, the fingers especially.
Yeah. Yeah, and this is very contrary to the Renaissance paintings that we've seen previously, where the proportions are perfect in the Renaissance paintings. They strive for as idealistic a form as they possibly can without being too exaggerated. And he kind of went out of his way to eschew that perfection, as a kind of rebellion against the perfection of the Renaissance. And of course, the at the time, because the world was in flux, because there was war going on, the War of the Papal States, the incursions of Islam, the numerous external forces. And then this was after the Reformation as well. And it wasn't too long after Luther's 95 Thesis was posted, which I think was like 1517 or something like that. It's not terribly long after that. And the world was in a lot of upheaval. And so the wealthy people at the time really, because it was really easy to get a Renaissance master, not even a Renaissance master, but that style was so ubiquitous that it was easy to get a really perfect image of somebody. But not unique and interesting enough, especially when you have a lot of money. And so the wealthy people often want something different and challenging, and if for no other reason, to show off to other wealthy people.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of that in the Mannerist works, where they're different on purpose in defiance perfection of the Renaissance. To it's kind of almost avant-garde.
I was starting to
we
make those, that presumption just looking at it. Yeah, because the faces are all very similar in a sense, and it's almost like Pontormo is trying to get people to project some of differences onto the figures rather than the figures being different themselves.
Right. Yeah, it is a style that's meant to kind of challenge the viewer. Which again, we've seen with more contemporary artists like Hopper or even Dolly. They really challenge the viewer to see something in a different way. And that really played out in Mannerism. That played out in the use of color, first off, because there's a lot lighter colors. There's the contrasting, there's a lot of pastel colors in here, which we'll see works, but the colors are usually pretty light. There's not really, even though the background is dark, it's not necessarily meant to be more of a like a Caravaggio's chiaroscuro. Of course, because he predates him by like 100 years. But it's more like the bright colors of the viewer, of the artist, or of the characters in the scene. So speaking of the bright colors, we'll jump over to the next piece. This is an altar piece. The Deposition from Us. It depicts the scene where they're taking Jesus off the cross. And this is it's very different than the standard. It's very different than the standard depiction of the deposition. And I'll just read through my blurb here. So this was painted between 1525 and 1528. This is tempera, which we talked about as a less forgiving medium than oil.
Mm-hmm.
And it was painted by a commission of uh, Ludo, uh, Ludovico Capioni.
Yeah.
Yep. Ludovino Capioni from the Capioni Chapel in Santa Felicia, Florence. And this is an altarpiece, and it's rather large. It measures 313 by 192 centimeters, or 123 by 76 inches. So, as a departure from the Renaissance style, this painting features no cross and is emblematic of the style of elongated figures contorted into unusual positions. Bright colors contrast with darker. They contrast with the darker chiaroscuro colors that we see later, that will become the standard during the Baroque, and it gave the composition a really airy, light quality. The characters kind of inhabit a flat space, and it really appears as a swirl of body. And the undulating contortions have been interpreted to express the apoplectic and uncontrolled spasms of the melancholy after Christ's death. We see in the center the Virgin sways, and this was kind of a controversial movement at the time that arose during the Middle Ages, in the notion that Mary fainted during the Passion, which I don't believe is recounted in the Bible.
It is not.
But it was a notion that was put forward. Yeah.
I mean, it's something where there's been room for interpretation about that, simply because it just does not say if she fainted or not. So, but it's a good theme to have in a painting, especially as an altarpiece.
Yeah. And honestly, I think that notion of her swoon, contrary to the saintly figure that we know, or that Mary has been portrayed as. And what I mean by that is that she would be more passionate and stoic, because fainting is kind of a feminine thing.
Mm-hmm.
And even though she's not meant to be not feminine, she's not meant to be weak either. And fainting is kind of a sign of weakness. And I think that's why it was kind of controversial. And it wasn't widely adopted. It was found throughout art, Renaissance art. I mean, it's found in art today, but again, it was not recounted in the Bible. So speaking of the swooning Mary, Pontormo does a self-insertion over here immediately to the right of the Virgin. This character in the background with the kind of melancholy look is often interpreted as being Pontormo. So as you can see, the really light colors, and this is a big altarpiece, and it's all above an altar, and that color scheme really kind of give a bright. It would kind of brighten up a room in a way. Yeah. The light pastel colors would, and it's really in contrast to the feeling of the scene. And you can see there's the apoplectic spasms, I think, makes a lot of sense. And just because of the way you see all the people kind of acting hysterical, and especially and fainting, that's pretty symbolic of apoplexy.
Yep.
There's two faces, I think, in here that portray the most emotion, though, and that's the little guy that's holding Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of emotion in that face. It looks very distraught, and then the guy holding his legs as well. He has an incredible amount of emotion in his eyes.
That is just
The
remarkable, that the expressions that he can capture. You almost imagine that is something that he got very used to by maybe looking in a mirror during his youth.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, of course, being a very melancholic and kind of tragic, having a tragic upbringing would be, he would be familiar with feelings of loss and this feeling of really um despair, I think. And there's not too many. So the character holding Jesus's legs is looking at the viewer. I think the most distraught character is kind of looking out. The kid holding Jesus has it kind of has a he's gazing out into the distance um in a really a way that really shows a lot of despair, I
Mm-hmm.
think. And again, we can see along with that the kind of unnatural contortions of the body and the the departure from the exacting proportions that Renaissance art really showed. Jesus's body is twisted in a really kind of odd fashion, and the arms and the torso are not proportionate at all. And that kind of goes with a lot of these people. Of course, the necks being so long and the bodies being stretched so far is kind of it gives a really weird anatomical feel,
Something
which was
I'm going to throw in now, although I'd considered saving it for later. Um, I have to wonder if his experience with death, especially during the siege of Florence, and his childhood trauma with his parents both dying. When you see a corpse, it does have that uncanny valley look, that elongated neck. Even as someone with a short neck in life, when they're dead, they will have that weird elongation. And I just wonder if that's something that he unintentionally or intentionally incorporated into his art.
very good point. Because you're right, at the during this died from disease and plague outside of just being starved to death during a fucking siege.
Yeah, but you don't always see piles of corpses, and that's almost the thing I'm getting from a lot of this is human bodies just piled up.
Yeah, I'm certain he did see that, and of course they did learn a lot of their anatomy from corpses too.
Mm-hmm.
They studied corpses and dead bodies, and there would have been no shortage of dead bodies to study during this period of time as well. So this was slightly before the siege, and so we'll move into the next piece, which during the siege. And this is it's very different than very different, and it's portrait of a halberdier, um, painted in 1529 to 1530, and this also been posited to have been painted much later, 1537, but scholars can't really decide. And so we're going to stick with the 1529 to 1530 because it makes a better narrative. So this was originally oil on panel, and it was later transferred to canvas. And this is currently residing in the Getty Museum in LA. And this is again not a giant painting, but a pretty standard size one. It's 92 centimeters by 72 centimeters, or 36 by 28 inches. So this to be either Francesco Guardi, a young soldier of the Florentine Republic during the Siege of Florence, or a young Cosimo Medici, Cosimo I Medici, after his first victory in 1537 during the Battle of Montenuolo. However, the provenance of the painting makes it more likely to be the earlier one. And Vasari has, there's notes from Vasari about a portrait of a portrait in one of his books. And so this tracks with that. So this was painted during the siege, and it shows the young defender of a dying republic. So he was part of the defense trying to hold off the invading forces. The kid's, he's incredibly young and more than adolescent. And his stance is theatrical with his hips turned and his torso twisted. And the standards of Renaissance portraiture was really to display the person with an air of authority. While this shows tension and the gaze is steady, but his face appears to be indifferent, if a little not uncertain. So as a young guardsman who's tasked with maintaining the Republic, there would be an incredible amount of pressure on a kid like this. But then also the fact that he is a kid, I think puts a really fine point on how important the defense was, and how pressing the siege was, because they're not going to recruit, don't have to.
Yeah, and yes, you'll always get the 12-year-old who wants to go to war because it's an adventure trope, but that is clearly not someone who's going to sit for a portrait.
No. And of course, this shows the elongated proportions that are typical of Pontormo's work and the Mannerist style. The kid's neck is really long, his face is really long, which I think adds to the softness, but the kind of tension of his gaze. It adds to the uncertainty of his look, because he does not have a super confident look on his face. He looks a little uncertain, I think is the best way to put it.
Yeah. And
the proportions are weird because you see how big his hands are.
Yeah.
Somewhat out of proportion. He's got like those Warwick hands. He's got really big hands. And of course, this is a traditional costume, but it's a traditional garb that the halberdiers wore at the time. Although the gold chain and the gold medallion on his cap do kind of point to a more wealthy or regal endowment for him. So it's possible that he is a noble who has been fighting because his family he's the child of a wealthy family, and they're like, it's your duty, as it would be for most people of the city. It's the city states, like, defending his family and his republic.
Well, and also just,
it's not
specifically about the cap medallion, that would potentially be either a signifier for a specific unit or a specific duty that he has to do. So badge of rank in a sense. The gold chain, that could be something similar as well. And if I had the time to deep dive into either individual, we could probably figure out, okay, maybe he was part of the palace guard, or was assigned to a specific gate or something like that. Things like that, the little details like that often betray kind of this is either rank or a specific assignment, which is fascinating, because you had later what are called gorgets, the little half moon discs that you'd see with certain ranks and positions in military police in the early 20th century. And that was derived from this period. Granted, that's a whole big story in and of itself. But usually, this is something that's emblematic of someone who has either some degree of authority or duty, which is a great thing to have captured in this painting.
Yeah, really done in amazing detail as well. Because if you do zoom in on the cap, you can see that medallion is pinned his cap with a small chain.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Granted, it looks like
the
one
chain
dude
is done in really good detail.
One dude's lifting up another dude or something.
Yeah, it does. It looks like it's like a pro wrestling scene where one guy's getting ready to body slam the other guy. he's caught him off the ropes and he's getting ready to give him the backdrop. But I think that it shows that Pontormo had a great deal of talent, and that his departure from that Renaissance style was not because of a lack of talent. It was a direct choice, because he obviously had the skill to render things in great detail and in great realistic detail as well.
Mm-hmm. And I also really like the background. It's just so simple without being obscene about it.
Yeah, it is in mute, and it does not distract from the subject in front of it. And I can see how this kind of like that muted background, which is again another departure from the Renaissance paintings, because in so many of the Renaissance paintings, the background, things like St. George, St. George and the Dragon, like the background is incredibly detailed. It has a lot of the trees and blah, blah, blah. The landscape doesn't need to be as ornate as he made it, but he put detail into it. And we saw that with a lot of Titian's works too. With that, we're going to jump from portrait into something that's more emblematic of the time, or emblematic of the style, I should say. And this is the Martyrs. This is oil on panel, painted between 1529 and 1530. Painted the monks of Florence's Spendale degli Innocenti, and is currently in the Galleria Palentina in Florence. It's not very large. It measures 65 by 73 centimeters, or 25.5 by 28.7 inches. It depicts the 10,000 Roman soldiers that converted to Christianity and were subsequently executed en masse, being crucified on Mount Ararat. The foreground character to be Saint Arasius, who was the commander of the soldiers. And the crowd, it's a really crowded composition. It shows bodies on bodies, and there's no real spacing, and the typical Renaissance scenery is absent. The scale does not appear to be epic, kind of like with Titian's Bacchus and Ariadne or the Sistine Chapel. Both of those had really grand proportions and grand scale. The specifically Bacchus and Ariadne, it had really detailed backgrounds that told a big part of the story, with the Theseus's ship flood going away, and then the procession behind. It gives kind of a more grand scale, as to where this is really compressed, like this thing in a really fine space from what this looks like. So there's several different scenes compressed into a single tableau, and this really highlights Pontormo's mastery of the human form. The crucified soldiers in the top show the stretched proportions typical of Mannerism, and the contorted forms left highlight the unnatural positions that we see a lot of in his work. And there's not really a wide open sky, but the sky is visible, and it's clouded and really crowded in as well. But despite the crowd position, there's not a ton of darkness, and the colors are still light, even though they are pretty muted. This is really, it was Pontormo's study of the male form, and it highlights his ability to capture bodies in serpentine and distinct poses. And this was another work painted during the Siege of Florence, and it's believed to be a reflection of the tension and suffering happening in the city at the time. As thousands of people were dying due to famine and disease, starvation, Pontormo would have been exposed. Well, I mean, everybody in Florence would have been exposed to massive amounts of death, massive amounts of bodies, like we talked about previously.
Mm-hmm.
His exposure to the dead and death would have been pretty broad, and it would have given him, ample opportunity to study the human form and to study the way that, if you're going to pile bodies up, they're not going to land in natural position, right? Our limbs are going to twist in weird ways. Bodies are going to twist in weird ways. And you can kind of see a lot of that reflect here. Let's see, the man at the beginning in the front, the saint, has a very stoic look on his face.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a whole lot going on. And it is a really crowded, it's really crowded, and it seems like there's not a ton of depth to it, even though there is. The proportions are off. It seems like the proportion should have more depth to it.
It's, as looking at it, it's like the figures that are supposed to be on Mount Ararat are larger than kind of the figures in the mid-ground that are being herded around by the man with the flag. It's just, it's a little optically elusive at that.
Yeah, a lot. And that's a good way to put it. It's very, it is optically elusive in that it really, you try to get a sense of the proportion and the position of people. You don't get a good sense of it because the proportions are all fucking weird. I mean, even the people in the back under the cherubs, look at how big the cherubs are. They're not generally portrayed that large, but they seem huge in comparison to people on the ground.
Yeah.
They don't even seem like cherubs, even though they're painted like cherubs. And it's really kind of hard to tell whether they are above the people on the hill or whether they're above the soldiers being herded there. So I myself am not incredibly familiar with this myth or with this story. So I just know that this is what you have any more. Do you know anything more about this story of the 10,000 martyrs?
It's one of those, its veracity is kind of in that nebulous realm, but it was supposed to be mostly Roman soldiers who'd converted and then were just massacred in Turkey. But it's one of those, it's more emblematic. I don't think it was a single event. It was just compressed into a single event by later, historians. Although, interestingly, I think Durer did another large print of this as well.
Oh, interesting. And I should have looked more into it, but I didn't. I just got the base story.
Mm-hmm.
I was hoping you knew a little bit more, and that's good because that's than I knew. So So with that, we'll actually jump to our last piece as we are coming close to wrapping up here. So the last piece we're going to look today is Venus and Cupid. So this is we showed you Bronzio's version of this, and this is Pontormo's version of it. So this was painted in between 1523 and 1534. This is an oil on panel, and it's based on a lost cartoon by Michelangelo. So the cartoons were just drawings, and there's a back to that, and maybe we'll cover that at a different time of what cartoons are, because Pontormo had a lot of cartoons, which is, it's different than what we know a cartoon to be today. So this is currently in the Galleria dell'Accademia in Florence. It measures 128 by 194 centimeters, or 50 by 76 inches. This was once owned by Alessandro de' Medici in its early life, where it was censored to cover Venus's nudity. And it depicts the goddess Venus with her son Cupid, and it is renowned for its it's renowned for its depiction of sensuality. And while Venus's anatomy appears stretched, it's really Cupid's body that's contorted in the most severe way, which is another thing we saw in the other version. His arm and hip are twisted in a human manner. And while Renaissance aimed for ideal proportion, this purposefully eschews that. It goes its way to distort the form of the figures. So the relationship between mother and son is ambiguous. The embrace doesn't seem maternal, but you don't know if it's really possessive or erotic or both. His face is really restrained and cool, not like cool man, but like cold. They're very kind of stoic in a way, where there's no real overt passion and there's not a lot of emotional register on them. And again, there's no atmospheric depth. The scene is crowded and compressed. The landscape does not expand and widen the story as with Bacchus and Eros or St. George and the Dragon. Subject occupy a shallow and intimate right immediate to the and then the masks over on the right-hand side are an interesting part too. They're symbolic of the theatricality of the scene, showing deception and illusion, and alluding to love and intimacy being a performance, likely a reflection of Pontormo's views of relationships. And the masks hanging off of the bow symbolizes the dangerous and performative nature of love and relationships, that love can hurt you and love can damage you. And this painting maturation of the Mannerist style, and it depicts, as the scene depicts, that kind of refined tension that Pontormo to show in his work, by kind of giving you a confusing scene that makes you think about it more than anything. So I think that, given his kind of obsessive and crazy nature, he would have struggled mightily with relationships. He doesn't have any kids. He doesn't have a wife. He never married. But it's impossible to think that he never had any relationship with women. So I think that his depiction of the masks and the bow, showing that love is dangerous and love can hurt, and that love is performative and oftentimes more performance than anything else. I think that this to me really, I think it gives me an insight into, or it gives me an imagined insight into his life. He would have been very heartbroken at times, that he would be very as well, and that he would not want to open up his heart to another person, which would track with him pushing people away and being reclusive.
Yeah, I mean that much loss at a young age, plus whatever happened in the intervening years, whether rejection or other loss. I just can't imagine someone not like him, not just kind of withdrawing, generating art, and expressing everything through that art. And I'm talking even day to day thoughts. I mean, if the man's recording his bowel movements, he's going to be interjecting into his art all sorts of other things where we may not see it, but maybe he wrote it in there. Wrote it in there with his brush.
Yeah. And given the fact that this was not painted for a patron, but later sold to somebody, I think really speaks to it being an expression of his own inner turmoil towards love and loss.
Mm-hmm.
And really, to me, makes him a more interesting character. Possibly because I relate to him even more in that regard. Being a weird kind of recluse myself.
Is there something you need to tell us about your staircase, Dave?
If I had a staircase to retract, sometimes I would. Although I do have people over all the time, and I have lots of friends, so I'm not an introverted person, and I don't hide away from the world like Pontormo did. But I can understand how he would have, had he experienced break or betrayal, that he would look at love as something performative and dangerous. And, like I said, given his temperament, it doesn't seem unlikely that would be the case. So with that, I think we're about done. We got a few more minutes here to talk about stuff.
Wow,
but that's really
we've hit all the highlights
right
early.
On time.
Wow, I'm impressed.
Yeah. So there's no fat on this episode, not like figures, which seem a little Rubenesque as well.
They do, yes.
That you can see how works. Some of the Baroque masters really took cues from the Mannerist style for their paintings, because this kind of, and of course it's probably more reflective of the actual people at the time too. There probably wouldn't have been a lot of buxom women, especially not ones that he would have access to. And of course the buxom women weren't the ones that were attractive, because they did enjoy small breasts and wide women.
Yeah, that is a
back then.
Like, oh look, that beauty standard of every generation changes. So this is definitely like to compare it to something more modern, like the flapper era.
Yeah, definitely. And so with that, let me see who we got coming up next. Next week, we talking about, find my list. Next week, we are talking about Anthony van Dyck, the Dutch Baroque master, who is, I consider him, he's like one of the big three Dutch masters. We already talked about Rubens, and we talk about Jordaens, and Van Dyck really rounds out that trio. He's contemporary to him, and he was an amazing Baroque artist. And I think we'll be able to use this. We'll be able to see more now that we've actually talked about Mannerism and talked about shift Renaissance perfection to the instability and kind of nebulous forms of the Mannerist works, that we'll be able to appreciate the stark realism of the Baroque masters even more.
Mm-hmm. Well, and so, I'm glad that we're layering on these movements, because from our first season definitely was hit or miss because I just don't know what we expected. And now that we're able to layer this and give the audience a bigger perspective, I think is a great way to build into the future for this project.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Our next two artists are Dutch, Maureen, just so you know. We're gonna be trouncing around your hometown for that. So with that, I think we're at our hour, and so we'll go ahead and wrap up. I would like to thank everybody for coming out. I thank you for appreciate your input, your opinion on this, and I appreciate working with dude. So
I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been an amazing project. I'm glad we started this all on a whim.
Yeah. It was just for shits and giggles. And so with that, we'll go ahead and close out. So we'll see you all next week, folks. Have a wonderful week.
Indeed. Take care and go look at some art, damn it.